what's going on with Biden? I thought he was a front runner and everyone loved him. Right?
Yeah, he did until he wasn't. Now,
okay.
I want to say, if you guys go back in our video history, there's a video I did, I don't know, like 2 months ago. It was the first Biden video I did in Perspectives. It's about, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes. If you watch that, everything I've been saying about Biden back then, and I may even be even further back at this point, it's all coming to fruition. And I remember the very last thing I said in that video, we look forward to your election and your race. And here we are enjoying his election and his race. And other people are not, however, enjoying his race. So, former Vice President Joe Biden, the early frontrunner for the self-imposed by the media saying he's an early frontrunner, for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, lost support among African Americans after taking heat on racial issues during the party's first debate, according to Reuters IPSOS poll. 22% of adults who identify as Democrats or independents said that they supported Biden, down from 8% from a similar poll conducted earlier in June. Support for Biden among blacks, a critical demographic voting bloc, was cut in half, with about 2 out of 10 saying they backed President Barack Obama's former vice president, which is something we predicted, that people had that connection, and that was basically his campaign that he was running was, hey, you know Obama? I was his vice president. That's most of his campaign.
It's interesting that Obama has still not joined him on the campaign trail, has a hands-off approach to him. Obama is just basically backpedaling away from Biden as fast as possible, not even associating himself with him on the campaign.
And so compared to 4 out of 10, so his love has been cut in half, just like we thought it would. Mm-hmm. But they appeared to be looking elsewhere after Kamala Harris, a U.S. senator from California, also seeking the presidency, criticized Biden for opposing mandatory busing to integrate schools in the 70s and for his cooperation with segregationists when he was a young senator. Her support rose by 4% points to 10%, so she has 10%, so 1 out of 10 people they poll thought she's pretty good, which of course the mainstream media means you're definitely the next front runner. We guarantee it. We're going to do a bunch of coverage to make it true. Except if we've talked before how she has a lot of skeletons in her closet in a very similar category.
In fact, social media already did their homework on her when she made her announcement, way before Biden or Bernie made their announcements.
Biden right now is the quote-unquote front runner as determined by the news, which means he gets hit the hardest, the fastest, and if he's gone, that just means that someone else is going to come next. But the poll found that now that Harris is now the 3rd most popular candidate for the Democratic nomination behind Biden and U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. It's good to see him getting mentioned in the article, who was backed by about 16% of Democrats and independents, but we know that he's not going to go anywhere. His policies are weird and white, and he's too old, and his policies are too consistent, so he's not a reasonable candidate. Support for Harris, who was 4th in the previous poll, rose with black voters as well as among women and people who make at least $100,000 a year. So it looks like that support for Biden is transferring right over. Several other candidates saw small gains since the June poll, and I want to say, if you add them up, all these small gains, they're larger than the gains that Kamala has made. So this is a fun little editorializing they're doing. Anyway, several other candidates saw small gains since June polls, including Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Beto O'Rourke. That's pretty much it. What do you guys think?
All right, Lainey.
I don't know. As I said, I support Bernie, and I will support his candidacy. I will do that. It's just what I'm not getting here is that it didn't work. I mean, it just absolutely didn't. I mean, you had this person who was saying, when Donald Trump was running, you had this person who was saying horrible things, and they put up, a very centrist candidate, and it failed miserably. And it failed against the media's wishes. It failed against the pollsters' wishes.
Right.
It all failed spectacularly. And now if we're looking at who's getting the media attention, we've got some more progressive candidates. We've got some outsiders. We got Tulsi Gabbard, who is getting all this attention, and Bernie was actually getting a huge amount of attention. We know that. We know that this is happening. They're rewriting history, or it's revisionist.
Right.
It's absolutely revisionist.
Like when we landed our Continental Air Force.
Yes. I mean, maybe they're all shooting off fireworks and drinking at the same time, and that's what's causing all this to happen.
Yeah.
But we know about this, and we know that there's been media collusion. If you look at what happened with Ed Schultz,
Right.
MSNBC, and then everybody, when he went over to RT to start working again, they condemned him as a traitor.
Right.
But we're seeing how this narrative is being set up here. This has failed. It has been shown to fail spectacularly, and everybody's doubling down.
Okay, so when it comes down to seeing Biden actually losing support, though, it's again what we said on the show every single time. The more Biden speaks, the more people know who he is. The more we learn about Biden, the more we can realize that he's just Trump. But he's just very polished. He's able to hide his failures very easy thanks to the neoliberal media. This is what happens when we have such a rigged system. We have these candidates that talk like robots. We have these candidates that are completely out of touch and yet continue to lie about what they do or what they're offering the American people. He's saying that he's for green energy. He's saying he's for civil rights. He's saying he's for LGBTQ rights. He's saying he's for the environment. He's saying all these things that people want to hear, but he never follows through. When he gets a call from Wall Street, the big banks or major corporations, Biden will say, yes, sir, no, sir, all right then, sir, and do their bidding. That's who Biden is. And that's why he's losing African-American supporters, because as African-American voters realize that he's this flawed candidate, they also look at his stance on the civil rights movement. And this man is not who he says he is. Just because he was Obama's vice president doesn't mean he's your friend. It means that we live in a neoliberal system and people need to wisen up just to how flawed our system truly is.
And it also means that this is, in a sense, good news in the long term. So think of it this way. America has never-ending primaries. So we still have, 30 years until the actual primary takes place. So what we have already seen with Biden as an example of this is people simply forget and people simply aren't aware. And it really was only... you've had mainstream media that has been the gatekeepers of news for decades and decades and decades. And it was only in 2008 that social media reached the point of relevance, and 2016 where it perhaps arguably had a larger contributing factor to the election than the mainstream press. So Biden, all these establishment candidates are all backed by the media backing them, because the media gets I think it's about $4 billion every election cycle through television ads, which are given by political consultants, which get a 5 or 10% cut based on how many television ads they do. And then of course you have the turn in, turn out. You have a number of people who lost their primaries against progressives who are now contributors on NBC. You see the same thing with Trump people, because all they really care about is access. Access means that they can do this, that, or the other. And on top of that, these news agencies, if you want to call them that, are owned by much larger corporations. MSN is owned by Comcast, CNN, Time Warner, so on and so on. So what we're dealing with here is people remembering what they forgot. People loved Biden until they remembered him, and now they don't. The second that they don't remember him, they don't like him, which makes me think that, and this is what I've thought for a while, it's going to be continuous with all the other candidates. People are going to love Kamala until they start going, oh, she has similar issues with race, and how she refused to do body cameras, how she arrested parents for kids that were truant. She has how Steve Mnuchin, the current Treasury Secretary, he donated money to her campaign. She was the only Democrat to receive contributions from him, and she's also the Democrat that let him out of what would have possibly been a jail sentence. Yeah. So this is what we're dealing with. Biden's going to fall. We've made a bet before about when that's going to happen. When he falls, then the establishment's going to have to fit in someone new to be the primary standard bearer, and it's probably going to be Kamala, and then she's going to be exposed in a similar fashion.
Yeah. So also, I want to read a very interesting chat that just happened on our live stream chat. Kim Harden has stated this: if Bernie wants to secure the black vote, he would pick Nina Turner. Hashtag burn and turn. And she also stated this: hell, Obama wasn't our friend. And you know what? She is absolutely correct. And here's why: it was Obama that got rid of habeas corpus. It was Obama that basically slapped the wrists of the bankers and the executives at Wall Street when they destroyed our economy. It was Obama who continued the military-industrial complex, and it was Obama that implemented a lot of these harsh policies that in turn was passed down to President Donald Trump. And it was Obama who could have used his presidential powers to appoint another Supreme Court judge. Granted, to be fair, that pick that he had was a corporatist through and through. But now we're in this situation where a lot of civil rights and women's reproductive rights are in danger. And Obama always played it safe, the middle ground, and constantly appeased the Republicans. I mean, honestly, to the Republican establishment, Obama was their best friend. He was their best friend, and he was a good friend to Wall Street and the big banks.
The NRA loved him. They could lobby against him. It was like he did everything the Republicans wanted when he
gave them more.
He gave them more, and they got to fundraise off the fear of him continuing to exist.
And we have to consider also that, there was the inheritance of the Clinton presidency, which did an enormous amount of damage to a lot of people, but particularly communities of color with the crime bill, also that bankruptcy bill.
Yeah. And that, of course, all laid the path to Donald Trump being elected.
All right, and one more quote too before we move on. Kim Harden mentions this: Bernie has got to stop being so nice. I agree. Time to, raise out the swords and charge.